Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite, or whatever the case may be. My name is Marcus, and I am the host of the Black Brazil Today YouTube channel, as well as the BlackBrazilToday.com blog, where I analyze Brazil from the perspective of race. So, as some of you who are, connected to the situation in Brazil already know, yesterday was actually the Day of Black Consciousness, November 20th, celebrated every year. Beyond just the significance of the day, the actual entire month of November is considered what they call the Mês de Consciência Negra, meaning the month of Black consciousness. It's somewhat equal to what you find in the United States in February, where we call that Black History Month. So definitely wanted to talk a little bit about this. Shout out to somebody who dropped a comment on the YouTube channel, I think yesterday, just reminding everybody, for people who's interested, she said, or he said, today, which was yesterday, is Brazil's Day of Black Consciousness. So I didn't get a chance to put up a video. I think I do have a video about the Day of Black Consciousness from last year, but just wanted to go over this real quick to understand what the significance of this important date is. The day has been celebrated as the Day of Black Consciousness for a number of years, or decades, if you will, since going back to the early 70s. But it's only been sanctioned as an official national holiday celebrated across the country as the President Lula da Silva signed it into law sometime, I think, at the end of last year, if I'm not mistaken. I'm going to talk about that as we go through this video. So I also wanted to talk about some historic incidences and events that have shaped Black Brazilian history. And it goes well beyond just some of the more well-known pieces of Black Brazilian history that we know about. So today's video, November 20th, Black Consciousness Day becomes a national holiday in Brazil. Learn more about historic Afro-Brazilian struggles. And as usual, if you like this video, please give me a like, give me a thumbs up. Like this video, share this video, consider subscribing to the channel as I continue to pump out content, and click on the notification bell so you know when I put up new videos. And with that said, let's talk a little bit about November 20th and November as a whole. So this is this is from the 20th Black Day of Black Consciousness march in Sao Paulo. I've participated in a number of these marches over the years. It always ends up on the steps of the municipal theater in Sao Paulo. And that's historic because the modern day Black movement in Brazil, it started on, I think it was July 7th, 1978, and different organizations that came together to form what's called the Movimento Negro Unificado, the Unified Black Movement, met on the steps of the municipal theater in 1978. So this is a lot of times where the march ends up, every year when they have the big march on November 20th in Sao Paulo. Now, you have these type of marches going on all over the country, but the one that I've seen and I'm more familiar with is the one in Sao Paulo. So why November 20th? I'm going to talk a little bit about that in the article. I've talked about this in numerous other articles and videos. The rejection of May 13th as a day that should be recognized in Black Brazilian history, because May 13th, 1888, is when the so-called Golden Law was signed, and it officially ended slavery, making Brazil the last country in the Americas to abolish slavery. Then we have a number of struggles, as I've said, over the last, let's say, 500 years, almost 500 years in Brazil, that go beyond the most famous recognized incident and location of the Black struggle at the Quilombo dos Pomares. The Quilombo, for English speakers, you can translate that as maroon societies. These are societies where fugitive slaves go to set up their own societies away from, slavery. Again, so it's recognized now as a national holiday, whereas before, cities would celebrate the day, but it wasn't something that was nationally recognized. So that has recently changed. So I want to talk a little bit about this. Is November 20th a national holiday? Understanding Black Consciousness Day. This first article is courtesy of the UOL website. And it says here, and it's right here, a new holiday will be celebrated on the 20th of November. President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva of the Workers' Party signed into law at the end of 2023 the bill that made the National Day of Zumbi and Black Consciousness a national holiday. The date is celebrated, well, it was celebrated actually yesterday, which was November 20th. Until last year, the date was only a holiday in 6 states: Mato Grosso, Rio Grande do Sul, Mato Grosso, Rio de Janeiro, Alagoas, Amazonas, Amapá, and Sao Paulo. In 2011, the then president Dilma Rousseff of the Workers' Party also made November 20th official as a national day of Zumbi and Black consciousness. This is the image that's usually recognized as the famous Quilombo leader known as Zumbi dos Palmares. He was from the Quilombo dos Palmares, located in the northeast of the country. It's the region where this runaway fugitive slave community was mounted. I think it's like a national memorial park now. The date refers to the death of the leader of Quilombo dos Palmares, one of the largest in Brazil during the colonial period of resistance against Black enslavement in the country. So what is Black consciousness? The concept of Black consciousness is linked to the appreciation of cultures of African origin and the promotion of the self-esteem of Black communities and people, impacted in various ways by the effects of racism. Therefore, this notion is directly linked to the Movimento do Orgulho Negro, or the Black Pride movement, which seeks to validate Black aesthetics and recognize the cultures originating on the African continent, which were suppressed during the period of European colonization and forced displacement resulting from slavery. In addition, the term applies to an awareness of racial issues as opposed to the notion of the superiority of white identity. The concept of Black consciousness is mentioned in the works of thinkers such as Frantz Fanon, a prominent psychiatrist, a political philosopher, and activist from the island of Martinique. Likewise, the contributions of W.E.B. Du Bois, a renowned sociologist, historian, and activist from the United States, also permeate this discourse, broadening the understanding of the importance and ramifications of this concept. Black consciousness as a social cultural movement also originates in landmark historical events, with a particularly notable role played during the independence struggles in the countries on the African continent. In this context, the concept not only reflects an appreciation and valorization of African cultural roots, but also serves as a catalyst for the affirmation of Black identity in the face of historical adversity such as European colonization and the cruel institution of slavery. In the 1970s, during the height of apartheid, the regime of racial segregation that lasted in South Africa for almost 5 decades, the Black consciousness movement emerged in that country, led by Steve Biko, a Black activist who was imprisoned, tortured, and tragically murdered at the age of 30. The group led by Biko organized strikes and initiatives aimed at exposing and weakening racist politics in South Africa. The movement also advocated raising the self-esteem of the Black population, propagating the premise that Black is beautiful, or o negro é lindo, as they say in Portuguese. This is a famous picture from the gathering of the Movimento Negro in the late 70s, various organizations coming under the one umbrella term of the Movimento Negro, meaning the Black movement in Brazil. At the same time in Brazil, the unified Black movement, again, the Movimento Negro Unificado, emerged, whose purpose was to act collaboratively in confronting violations of the rights of the Afro or African descendant population, including responding to violent and disproportionate police actions. In the Brazilian context, the MNU also started discussions about establishing a historic date to represent resistance to racism in the country, as opposed to May 13th, which marks the signing of the Golden Law, which abolished slavery in 1888. Again, always remember that Brazil received the vast majority of enslaved Africans of all of the countries in the Americas that received enslaved Africans. It's always estimated that Brazil received anywhere from 10 to 15 times more enslaved Africans than the land that we would come to know as the United States. Activists considered the abolition to be incomplete since the free Black population did not receive governmental support or assistance with access to land, education, or job opportunities. November 20th marks the anniversary of the death of Zumbi, the warrior leader of the Palmares Quilombo, again, Maroon Society, who was murdered in 1695, more than 300 years ago. Zumbi is revered as a symbol of resistance against slavery, which is why Black movement organizations and non-governmental organizations in Brazil chose this date to preserve the memory of this prominent historical figure and highlight his importance in the struggle for the emancipation of the enslaved. Now, most people who follow the question of Black history in Brazil are going to be familiar with the Zumbi dos Palmares and the Quilombo dos Palmares, but there's been numerous other events that have happened in history where Blacks, whether enslaved or free, played a prominent role and let's say going against the idea that black people were inferior or in fact the slave regime. There's numerous to talk about. A lot of them I've heard of, but actually today I did. Well, actually yesterday I learned of one that I wasn't familiar with. So let's learn a little bit about other struggles of Afro-Brazilians besides Palmares, the famous Quilombo, again meaning Maroon Society. This I want to say that this was the information taken here was actually taken from a video from what's called the Brazil de Fato YouTube channel. Okay, I want to definitely give credit for that. So in that video, the young lady in the video said, "No more human consciousness day." Because you got a lot of Brazilians who are not black who will say, "Well, why do we have to celebrate black consciousness? We're all from the human race. Why can't we just have human consciousness day?" It's like, okay, that's great that we recognize that we're all human, but we also have to recognize that all humans are not treated equally. And that's what the whole point of this is. No more human consciousness day, or those phrases that come up in November. Again, November representing what they call Novembro Negro, meaning Black November. The entire month is celebrated as Black history. The 20th is National Zumbi and Black Consciousness Day. And if there's a date just for that, it's because there's history, struggle, and a lot of bloodshed. Famous statue of Zumbi dos Palmares, I believe this taken from Salvador Bahia. The national holiday dates back to when Zumbi dos Palmares was killed back in 1695. Since then, there have been many resistances by Black people in Brazil that also deserve to be remembered, such as the Carrancas Revolt and the Males Revolt and the Chibata Revolt. And we're going to talk a bit more about each one today. Brazil de Fato explains. For more than a century, the Quilombo dos Palmares was a place of resistance for enslaved people fleeing from sugarcane plantations and mills in the then captaincy of Pernambuco state. However, it was Zumbi, one of its leaders, who made the territory nationally known. Back in the 1970s, almost 3 centuries after his death, activists celebrated Black Consciousness Day for the first time, motivated by the discovery of the date. It entered the country's calendar in 2011, but only became a national holiday in 2024. Slavery was the source of landowners and farmers' earnings, products for export, and upbringing of the white elite's children. One thing I wanted to point out here, let me see, which article do I want to talk about here? Okay, so it's this one right here. Formed in 1971, the Grupo Palmares of Porto Alegre, located, which is the state capital of the state of Rio Grande do Sul, located in the south of Brazil, initiated a movement to designate November 20th as the Day of Black Consciousness. So the Grupo Palmares of Porto Alegre, a number of these activists here, I believe they were all college students at the time, and they came up with that idea of recognizing November 20th as the Day of Black Consciousness. Okay. Even so, more than 136 years after its formal abolition, Black people are still marginalized. In this context, Palmares is seen as a symbol of a community with a life independent of the colonizing power. But apart from the Quilombo, other forms of struggle during and after slavery should also be remembered. Okay, so this is Princess Isabella. She's known for having signed what's called the Golden Law from March 13th of 1888. So it's 136 years, a little bit more than 136 years ago. 55 years before the formal abolition of slavery in Brazil by, again, the signing of the Golden Law by Princess Isabella. May 13th became known for another story, the Carrancas Revolt, the largest and bloodiest slave rebellion in the Southeast. On that May 13th, 1833, a full 55 years to the day, on the farms of the Junqueira family in the south of Minas Gerais, Gabriel Junqueira, son of the owner of the Campo Grande farm, went to supervise the enslaved, but ended up being killed on the way by a group of rebels led by Ventura Mina. Again, the Revolta de Carrancas, or the Carrancas Revolt, that it's known as. And I have to be honest, I had never heard of this one before. I have to do a little bit more research on this. When he arrived at the farm, 2 armed horsemen were already waiting for him. Then they went to the neighboring Bela Cruz farm, where they joined the slaves there. The attack resulted in the death of all the white people from the Junqueira family who were there. So another thing that needs to be recognized is that it's often said that, why did Black Brazilians passively accept slavery and the condition that they're in. And that's absolutely not true, because the more you dig into history, you find that there's been revolts. There's been organizations that speak out in representing the Black population. There's been several different periods of let's say Black activism in Brazil, whether we talk about from the slave era or post-abolition era. There's a lot of evidence that Black Brazilians have been fighting along and resisting all along. Let me see here. When he arrived at the farm, okay, I just said that. Let me see. The attack resulted in the death of all the white people from the Juqueira family who were there. After that, some of them went to the Jardim farm. I think the farm can also be known as a plantation, where the owner, João Cândido da Costa, already aware of the rebellion, locked up all the slaves and received the rebels with bullets. In the end of the Cajancas revolt, it left 30 people dead, 21 Black, 9 white, 17 were sentenced to death. Less than a month later, a bill was proposed by the then Minister of Justice to speed up the trial of enslaved people who were insurrectionists who attempted to take the lives of their masters. The law established a summary right for condemning Black people to the death penalty. 2 years later, in 1835, another important struggle took place, which is known as Revolta dos Males, the Revolt of the Males, which took place in Salvador. At that time, around 40% of the city's inhabitants were enslaved Blacks. Many of them were Africans and Muslims. So this is in the Northeast, Salvador Bahia, which is known as basically the African Cultural Center of Brazil. And so this famous revolt took place there, again, in Salvador Bahia. Hence the term Imale, which means Muslim in the Yoruba language. One of the characters in this story is Louisa Mahin, here, taken from a Google page, who possibly worked on the streets as a street vendor. Among her sales, she received and passed messages in Arabic exchanged between the rebels. You see here that Louisa Mahin is called a Brazilian revolutionary, even on the Google page, right? This is Louisa Mahin's famous son, Luiz Gama. One detail is that it seems she is the mother of Luiz Gama, a lawyer who freed more than 500 enslaved people. Luiz Gama is a fascinating history and character in Black Brazilian history. I kind of compare him to like a Frederick Douglass type. He was not allowed to be recognized or to study in a law school, but he studied on his own. And through his skills as a lawyer, he managed to free 500 slaves. There was a movie about Luiz Gama put out, somewhere between 3 and 6 years ago. Don't remember exactly the year, but that's big news, because more prominent Black Brazilian historical figures are starting to get their story told nowadays. So Gama was a great abolitionist. The Males Revolt took place on January 25th at the end of Ramadan, a popular Muslim holiday, with 600 enslaved Africans taken to the streets. However, it was unsuccessful, as the police were already aware of the uprising. Despite this, the movement influenced other revolts and remains a symbol of resistance. The Chibata revolt broke out on November 22nd. Actually, that's tomorrow. Tomorrow will make 114 years, and was led by naval workers. The most famous of them who led this revolt was a guy named João Cândido, this guy right here. The Revolt da Chibata. The Chibata actually means revolt. It was a revolt against the slave. It was a revolt against the whip. Military men being punished, by being whipped, equal to how they whipped slaves back in the slave era. And after this, the Marines, we're not going to take this anymore. So this led to this revolt led by this man, João Cândido. For almost a week, they took control of warships anchored in Rio de Janeiro and threatened to bombard the entire city. The main face of the revolt was João Cândido Felisberto, again, this man right here, the Black Admiral, as he became known. The sailors won their main demand, an end to corporal punishment, but were arrested by the government. João Cândido survived imprisonment and persecution by the armed forces and went on to live a life of anonymity. However, to this day, his only living son, Candinho, fights for financial reparations for the family and for his father to be included in the Book of Heroes of the homeland. The struggle of the Black people never stops. Whether in Brazil or in other countries, this group still needs to claim rights, fight to maintain those they already have, and denounce violations that occur on a daily basis. Brazil, in fact, has a journalism based on human rights, which is not afraid to name names and denounce racial crimes. Here, we continue to denounce police violence and veiled and open racism and make the demands of the Black population visible. Okay, so these were just a few of some historic events that are symbols of the resistance of Black Brazilians in Brazil for almost 500 years now. So I just wanted to share that as the Day of Black Consciousness is now recognized as a national holiday. Couple other things I wanted to point out here, because there was a section here. Let me see. When we talk about police violence in Brazil, there are numerous articles that I've featured over the years on the blog. I haven't talked a lot about it, but you know, if you go to the blog, blackbraziltoday.com, you'll find a number of articles that just talk about the police violence against particularly Black Brazilians. Here's a number of stories. If you go to like Black Brazil Today, you'll find just a number of articles here. Brazilian police, you know, they kill 17 times more Black people, well, by some accounts, 17 times more Blacks than American police killed in 2019. That's insane. How come, you know, the world doesn't know about these stats? These are just some various articles that have just shown Black Brazilians who have lost their lives because of some type of military police action. I found this study here really intriguing. It's from 2020, high mortality rates of Black men in slavery in Latin American countries. Black men had very high mortality rates in comparison to Black women. There's a particular stat that I wanted to find here. Okay, it says, although more than 60% of slaves brought to the Americas were men, genetic analysis shows that a large part of the genes of African descent come from women. This is even stronger in Latin America. According to the survey, for each man, between 4 and 17 women contributed to the genetic makeup of their descendants. So Black men, you know, they lost their lives in more of a higher rate than Black women. And then, you know, you can understand that a lot of the genetic, the genes that were passed on actually came from Black women, as they were violated by, you know, descendants of European white men, right? So November 20th being a huge celebration now, and it's not just the day, it's like throughout November, you'll find all types of activities and events going on that celebrate the month of Black consciousness. So, you know, I haven't, as I've returned to the United States, I haven't participated in this, but I still, you know, I keep my eye on this as much as I can. I'm going to be doing another video about the month of Black consciousness. This article just talks about the influence of the U.S. and Africa movements, the civil rights movement in the United States, Black Power in the United States, and the fight against colonialism in Africa, which influenced the development of the Movimento Negro Unificado in Brazil. Okay, they were also under surveillance, the same way that the CIA was monitoring civil rights and Black Power rights and movements in the United States. The same thing happened in Brazil. During the years of the military dictatorship, the Movimento Negro Unificado was under heavy surveillance by the SNI, Brazil's intelligence agency. So anyway, this is just a brief overview of some of the resistance that we've seen when we're talking about the Afro-Brazilian struggle. And these are some of the reasons why people felt it was necessary to celebrate not only November 20th as the Day of Black Consciousness, but also the full month of November, what they're calling Novembro Negro, the Black November, to celebrate the historic struggle and conquest of the Black community in Brazil. So anyway, I got a couple more videos that I want to do about this before November ends, but for now, I'm going to end this video here. Curious to know what you thought about today's content. Definitely drop a comment in the comment section. Like this video, share this video, consider subscribing to the channel. Click on the notification bell so that you know when I put up new videos. And with that said, I'm going to end this video here and request that you all come back. Check out the next video that I post here at Black Brazil Today.